finally finished Iceborne, kind of, apparently, but I did. But credits rolled. Credits rolled, but oh my god, the amount of messages that came to me so quickly, which like, it ain't over. Come back here. Whoa, slow your roll. Slow down. Come over here. So let's talk about this. We were doing the Elder Dragon. I've just nicknamed it the Gauntlet because that's what we did in the base game, and that was happening again. You figure out there's some Elder Dragon somewhere, and you track it down by doing various optional things, and then you fight the Elder Dragon. And I had reached a Black Veil, Veiled Vaal. Veiled Vaal Hazak, I think he's called. He's Black Veiled, something like that. He's just a bigger, badder version. He's Vaal Hazak Plus, we'll go with. And that's where I was starting my day. This turned out to be the second most difficult thing I did that day, because I did not have any armor whatsoever to prevent effluvia buildup. And for those of you following along who aren't even playing the game, effluvia is the sort of poop, the dust that he's poofing out. He keeps dooting it all over the place, and it builds up, and then it cuts your HP in half. And this one, the younger version of this, which is in the base game, it actually didn't matter, and it was the most disappointing Elder Dragon I had fought, because it was like, oh my god, I've got half my health. What do I do here? And he just didn't hit very hard. So it was like, oh, it doesn't matter. They like scaled it. I actually talked about that extensively of like, I think this is the reverse decision. And it's great for my analytical brain where they're like, that was a mistake. And I recognized it at the time. It's like, oh, you have this mechanic that cuts HP in half, but you've also balanced it because it doesn't do enough damage to actually kill you, so it doesn't matter. This time they went, not only should you be aware this is going to happen because it's happened before, but we're definitely not going to allow you to play around with this mechanic. Like, if you get hit, you are in big trouble, and it will probably kill you. Unless you've got, like, some BIS setup that you've Googled or something like that, then you're screwed. You really, and more the messaging is, you really should be able to have effluvia armor by this point, which will just nullify this mechanic, and then you're fighting a relatively normal big dragon. I did not. I had 0 effluvia resistance, and my initial thought was, let's try this, and I got my absolute butt handed to me. So my usual progress mindset here, which I apply to every video game, is like, well, give it 2 or 3 goes. It's the same thing I did with Behemoth, and I've done with some other things. And if I feel like it's doable, but like really sort of like inching over the line, then we'll go and get the other armor, because that's what's supposed to be happening here. So I was okay with that. However, on my like second pull, wasn't too bad. Started to recognize the patterns, started to learn the boss. It's like, oh, okay, when it rears up like this, there's like, it's going to do like a frontal effluvia, so you can kind of get behind and do some damage. There's another more bigger, grandiose version where he's going to fly up and he's like AoEing the whole area. That means we want to get out of there, because he creates like an enormous environment that's just full of effluvia bombs, very difficult to work in. So it's like, okay, we need to drag him out of that. Was doing okay, and I was like, this isn't a case of inching over the line. We can do this with just proper play. You can also take something called a Nullberry, which will get rid of the effluvia effect, but of course that just gives you your potential max HP back, but you still have to heal up all the damage that's been missing. So I killed it on the 3rd go, but it was a long fight. It was a very long fight, a lot of learning, and made me enjoy the fight. It made me wish in the base game it was more like this. That it really redeemed the fight in my eyes. And like I said, second most difficult fight I did that day, I think. It was really kind of fun. Now, what followed from there was a very interesting set of circumstances. We did another Elder Dragon, which wasn't too remarkable. And then the game got very serious all of a sudden. And it did this in the base game. So I recognized the patterns where I was like, huh. 2 questions. Either, because they keep telling you, like, are you sure you want to head out this way? Because it's going to get serious. Like, okay. This is either the last boss, like we did with Xeno, where you get all these warnings, then you just go to an arena with the last boss. Or we are going to a new zone, because one thing that was very noticeable about Iceborne is it only added 1 new zone. I would have expected a couple, probably, but they'd only added 1, the Horfrus Reach. So it was like, it is entirely possible here that we're going to discover something. And also, we hadn't fought Nergigante yet. And that's something we definitely were going to do, because we were tracking him down. So I was like, okay, so we didn't get the end boss until we'd prevented, because Nergigante is like the gatekeeper of the finale of the game in the base game. And now that's kind of happening again. And so off we go on this journey. And I'm like, let's just see what's happening. And again, it's that mindset of, I should probably go and gear up a bit more than I am now. I'm still wearing my Barioth armor, which isn't terrible. I'll come to the weapon in a minute. I'll come to as far as I knew, I had a decent weapon. And we'll go on our way. So I was ready, right? I'm ready. I'm like, okay, let's go see what the hell is happening. I have to say before we get into this, I want you to know my mindset here, is that what preceded this was just really well designed. And at the time, I don't think I appreciated it enough. And that's why sometimes I don't like doing immediate react about stuff like this. I want to think about it. I want to digest it a little bit. I want to look at it from some different angles than how I feel just in the moment. And I really appreciate what they did here, because I think it was very clever, and it was also risky, and I think it's a risk that paid off. In my eyes, I think it was a risk that paid off. Once again, we return to, I checked the map, it's one giant arena bowl. So I'm like, okay, we're at the last boss. And who should show up after some lengthy cutscenes but Nergigante ++. And I'm like, oh. Are they just making like a Nerd redemption arc? Like, is Nerd going to be the big bad at the end of this? And I'm kind of okay with that. They built this very dangerous looking arena because it's full of like jagged rocks and sharp edges and all that. So it feels like you're in some really nasty battle dome. And you're against Nerd, who is still using, I would say, his base game mechanics. So his mechanics weren't as advanced as what I'd seen of some of the monsters in Iceborne, who had wonderful new animations and some really crazy stuff, like Glavenus would be an example, you know. But he's brutal, he's fast, he's vicious, he's everything you fear. He still bleeds you, and I didn't know I was going to be fighting him, so I didn't have bleed resistance. And so you go toe-to-toe where there's no escape. There's not much environmental stuff you can do in here, other than there's a couple of ledges to try and jump on his back. Other than that, it's just one-on-one with the big guy. And I was like, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. This is almost poetic ending, is to be the showdown versus Nerd. And so we battled it out. But I had fought Nerd before, right? And if in Monster Hunter World, and I want to do this in another video, which is like the reception of some people who dropped in. Like, what is Mike's fascination with this? Because we're now 110 hours into this game, right? He's like, what is the fascination with this? Because anybody who's a casual viewer has just dropped in and been like, he's just fighting bosses for a really long time. And I've seen this on social media as well. Like, I just don't get the appeal. Is that that appeal is the personality and the relationship you've built with these guys in the past, and how that plays out. When you see Basil like fly out, you're like, oh, it's Basil, and Basil's like upgrading, and Basil's gonna bomb the hell out of the arena, right? And you know how Basil behaves, and Joe turns up, and you're like, oh, it's Joe. And then Nerd, you kind of feel something for. Nerd was someone we hunted in the past. Nerd was preventing all these things, and it actually pays off well later. But I beat Nerd because I did know his patterns, and as I was saying earlier, once you fought a monster once, your next time against them is significantly easier because you've done the prog, right? And they keep it similar, even though they do more damage and they sometimes have better attacks, especially if they're a twisted modified version. That you do know what's going on. So it wasn't super hard. It was nasty. He like did faint me once, but it was, other than that, it was pretty good. And I was like, wow, that's a cool ending. But the credits didn't roll, and then it was like, there's the old worm is here. And I'm like, oh, okay. There's something else. They're doing a similar sort of strange pop-up like they did with Xeno in Monster Hunter. Let's talk about this boss for a second. The actual, quote-unquote, final boss of Iceborne before post-game, which we'll get to in a second. What a decision this is. A very long fight that doesn't work as you've seen progress in terms of the difficulty of the game go so far. Because generally speaking, the monsters just get faster, add more debuffs to you, bleeds and poisons and things like that, and get more vicious and more able to counter-attack you. So you have to be even more, because it's a game based on animation lock, right? When you push your attack button, your character is committed to doing that, and you have to be very careful about when you press that attack button, and you feel punished if you do it wrong. This boss is extraordinarily slow, is very, very easy to like grip onto and weaken and damage, and lumbers and sort of plods around. And its main ability is the fact that if it does hit you, it's very, very, very nasty. Like, it's going to take a lot of your health away, and it will squash you, and it will stomp you. But that stuff is pretty easy to avoid. And my first impression fighting this big lumbering rock was, this isn't very hard. Like, Nerd was much harder than this, but he has a lot of HP, and you have to work through him for quite a long time. And then, of course, the big reveal, this is only phase 1, and we actually have an official first time proper phase 2. You can argue Xeno has a phase 2. You fight him in one arena for the first thing, and then it transfers to another one, but the fight is kind of the same. This is an entirely different fight that is all part of the same boss encounter. So the big rock shatters off, and that's just a shell, and beneath it is this old worm that's totally different, totally different battle arena, and has lots more new mechanics. That once again, and this is where at the time I felt when I died to this the first time, and I did die to this, it just took a few goes, I felt very disappointed in myself. And I felt disappointed because I was like, this fight really is not difficult. And it was the same thoughts that I had during Radagon at the end of Elden Ring, as I was shocked after fighting like Hoaraloo. I'm going to forget some of the boss names now, but like Malekith, the Black Blade, which are just awful, nasty, vicious, rapid fights that have multiple phases and all this, that this fight was just not hard at all. Like, the attacks are very, very slow, but there's something to be said for a fight that tests your patience to the limit, because if you do blunder, you're going to die. And phase 2 of the final boss, I don't know its name, I'm apologizing, but Rock and Softy they did name it later, but it's similar to the base game. They don't tell you the name until later. You're just fighting question mark, question mark, question mark. Is that this fight wasn't hard on first impression, because it's very large, it's pretty slow, it has numerous attacks that are really cool. I loved the sort of invisible tendrils that come from its fingers that can catch you out, and you can weave through them, although the hitbox in true Monster Hunter fashion is a little wonky. Its mega laser that it teaches you at the very beginning of fighting this is like, you can stand behind a rock and block it. However, that doesn't always work, which is what I found out later on, is that I was comfortably sat behind a rock and got blasted through it, and I was like, wait a minute, it doesn't always protect you? God damn it. But if you do make a mistake, those attacks will kill you. Like, they'll just flat out kill you. So when I died to it, I was like, I got greedy. This fight isn't hard. It's also got a ton of HP. And then I was dreading, it's like, do we have to do the whole fight again? And sure enough, you do. You start back at the rock phase. And I was like, okay. And the prog for me was really interesting. I think it took 4 goes total. And I'll explain why in a second. But the second and third pulls, I did the rock phase so clean. I didn't need any heals from anything other than just the cat's natural healing towards me. Or just using items that refresh. Like, I hadn't used any of my potions or anything. It was so free once I knew what to do, especially that you just attack the underside and do tons of damage to it, that I was like, this is kind of laborious. And my other prog brain kicked in. It's like losing interest in the easy part of the fight. And then got to the next part. And I died 2 more times to what I recognized on the third go is like, wait a minute. This fight has actually a phase 3. And it adds in a new mechanic where there's a room-wide AoE. And you have to watch where it's tunneling and position yourself accordingly. But it then does far more vicious things around it. It's almost like the actual fight kicks in at the last 50% of that boss's HP, where there's now sand traps which detonate and you have to keep an eye on them, but there's also sand traps that don't, and you have to move through those, so you've got to recognize which ones are the ones that are going to detonate, which ones are the ones that are not going to detonate, and these detonations will do like 80% of your HP, and it can also now scoop underneath itself, because before this you can stand underneath it and just kind of whack its legs, but now it's going to scoop underneath it, and it's going to sand trap that area, which slows you and explodes, and it can kill you extraordinarily fast. And it also has a better leap back, which means its frontal mega laser cannon, if you get caught slightly out of position or one animation out of position, it's going to blast you in the face and that will one-shot you. And I kept dying at this point, so I was like, right, I need to stop being so... I was frustrated with myself in thinking this fight's so easy. What I need to do is actually lock in and focus on this final phase and get it done. Now, that led to the actual kill pull, which was the worst pull I'd had. because I died and needed to be resuscitated during the stone phase because my brain is completely focused on the final 50% or whatever of the second phase and not on what I'm doing right now, which is, ask any of my raid leaders over the years, is a classic preach maneuver. Is once we're progging and my brain is like working on the next puzzle, which we're doing later on, I'll falter at some point in the easy part of the fight and be like, ugh, just angry at myself. It happens to me all the time. It's just part of my personality. I'm sorry. So I died there, and I had to use so many potions because I was getting hit by this rock thing, and I'm like, well, I almost like reset the fight. I was like, this is just a throwaway attempt. This is stupid. But I was like, I still need to practice this next phase. I need to take it a bit seriously and track it down. So I had to go into the final phase against Softy with no safety net at all. And I got to say, I did kill it. And it led to actually a really good fight. Like I was like, I actually appreciate this fight. And it wasn't until the next day, literally the very next day, that I was thinking about saying, what a good choice by the devs. Instead of just being faster, more aggressive, more nasty, more shreddy, more jumping around like a lot of the fights are, this was slow, lumbering, a test of patience. Another aspect of the game that really should be explored more, and a bit of a risk in what to do. Flashy, beautiful, lovely animations, interesting, shell-breaking, proper multi-phase boss fight. Super loved this. I actually think it was very good. I was frustrated myself because I didn't give this fight enough credit, and I think that's part of the fight design, is like the first part of the fight is so easy, it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security of what is going to happen later on. And the beginning part of Phase 2 also does that as well. So I actually super loved this fight. Much better than I liked Xeno, which I didn't like at all. This one I thought was really well done. And then the credits rolled. And obviously people were asking me my opinion on Iceborne, right? Before we get to the post-game stuff, which we'll get to in a second. I thoroughly enjoyed this. More than I thought I was going to. My fears coming in, if you even check back a few videos when we started Iceborne, were that they were just going to reuse a lot of the same enemies again, which does happen at the beginning of Iceborne, and gave me a sort of sense of dread of like, okay, is these just like reused? But what they did, I thought was really good in Iceborne, is they took the monsters of the initial game and they reworked them into a much more advanced and more interesting version. That I prefer to fight the Iceborne versions of these monsters than the base game versions, which is correct. And they are different. They do different things. They do different animations. They have different move sets. They might be the basis, like model-wise, you know, of something from the past. And then they reused and rejiggled their base game monsters to make them much more interesting because they're still around, but they made them more fun. I think the focus on proper turf war, where they're not sort of like just lumbering next to each other and you're not quite sure if they're hurting each other or not, but it's like good slick animations that were working together and letting you know what was going on. I really, really enjoyed Iceborne a lot. Even to the point that I was sometimes fighting old enemies, but done in a way that was super interesting. And the new enemies they brought in, I don't think I particularly hated any of them. I don't think so. I don't think there was one I was like, not as much as, say, Teostra and Lunestra, which I felt were a little cheesy. There are some bosses you fight, and you're like, this just feels a little cheesy and cheap. Didn't get that feeling through Iceborne at all. I felt very well. That might also be my experience with the game growing. Is like I didn't feel like I was being cheesed on. I think the worst I had was my first fights with Viper Toby, the acid dog, because I constantly got poisoned. Even though I was like, I dodged that. I know I did. Or I like take something to clear the poison like an antidote and just immediately get repoisoned. I was just like, this is just really annoying and the poison hurts. The only time then I felt that way, but even then I've refought that fight now and it was fine. The second time it was totally fine. I knew what was happening and all that kind of stuff. So it was fine. Yeah, Iceborne I truly enjoyed. However, that's where I finished that day. There has been another day since then. I said I had to leave as the credits finished up. I said I wanted to think about it. And then overnight, messages flooding everywhere. I was like, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. There's still way more to do. So I came back. Post-game Iceborne. Let's talk about this a little bit. So when I finished Monster Hunter World, the base game, immediately I got bombarded with like special assignments and things like that. Which was like, this is patched in content that came later. That didn't quite happen this time. So when I logged in the next day, I gauged the audience and I said, is there something that we should really be doing to fully experience this game, or is it like just grinding out gear? And they were like, yes, absolutely. Okay, so I was like, okay, let's go into it blind and see what the post-game presents me. Okay, so I get in, and the first thing is there's like a main story quest to chase down Nergigante. And I'm like, that's kind of odd, because the story of the end of Iceborne is that Nergigante is actually the one creature that is holding all of nature in balance. He is responsible, or that creature is responsible for maintaining natural order. And it's really kind of a cool revelation. It's like, this thing eats the elder dragons. If he's not there, they run amok and things can go crazy. And he keeps this semblance of order at the top of the food chain in order to make sure things don't get out of hand. And now we're going hunting him. I was like, well, that didn't make sense to me. I was like, why are we hunting this thing? We've just discovered that Nerd is like the hero. He's the dark knight of the monster world. We should let him do his thing. But they're like, well, we kill monsters round here, so let's go kill those monsters. I'm like, okay, I mean, that's where the story's going. I can't not do the main story. And then a special assignment did pop up after I'd taken this first quest, and it was to go and kill a Kirin. And the stupid admiral's back who takes credit for everything, despite the fact that he's never involved. And so it was a choice of what to do. So I was like, I'll continue. I'll do the main story and see what happens. And this led me to a new island. And I was like, whoa. They brought in another new zone. They patched in an entirely new zone. They did, but very quickly. And I have to say, I think this is a community sentiment. My first couple of hours in the grounding, whatever it's called, I really enjoyed a hell of a lot. I really enjoyed it. So immediately it gave me a new monster called Zingor, I think he's called. Zingor the Sparkly Dog. And it was just, it's a new zone, quote unquote new zone, because it's a zone that's made up of a quarter of every zone so far. It's got a bit of the jungle, a bit of the ice, whatever, right? A bit of the desert. And all the monsters in the game can appear there, and you can kind of control which monsters will appear. And what you do in this zone, at least for the couple of hours I was there, was wander around, kill any monsters that you find, and I have to say, after doing nothing but non-stop like endgame progress or new boss progress, just being able to wander around and just kill like a Banbaro, and it also is a testament to how much better I have got. I'm not great at the game, but how much better I have got is I bullied some of these guys. It was really fun. I was like, oh, like I can see these opportunity windows now. And I killed, they're not impressive. I killed a Banbaro. I killed a Great Jagras. I killed Toby. I killed a few of these guys back to back. And I was capturing them and I was sending them on their merry way. And then it's got these like Elder Dragon tracking things where it will unlock a new monster. And it was like, you've discovered one. You can now lure it out. And you can go back to the handler in the camp. You don't need to go back to the town and say, I want to fight this monster now. And then it said you can also like dictate which area you want it to be in, because in a Mythic Plus style or sort of Diablo PoE style is like these areas that you fight in will keep leveling up. The more monsters you kill in, say, the jungle biome, the jungle biome will level up and give you more stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So it just gets escalatingly more difficult. However, they've also unlocked, there was tons of tutorials, of course, augmenting your armor, which seems like an almost, it's not, you know, broadly speaking, endless progression path for your armor and weapons to keep making them better and better and better. The more resources you get, you can go past the caps the game has put in to make your character even more and more powerful. And I was like, that's kind of cool. But I liked this a lot. I had fun killing these things. I killed Zingor. That was great. But I was like, this does feel, guys, like just a grind. Now, casual me at home, chilling, not streaming, actually really would enjoy this. Is like I can just come here, I can just stay out here for ages, and I can just get on with my day, and I can kill a bunch of monsters and refresh my stocks and just keep going, and I don't need to come backwards and forwards. I've got all these different environments. I can get every monster in the game here. Pretty cool. I like it. But are we just going to be grinding out here until eventually some monster will spawn? So we had a referendum. What I did is I had our lovely team member Bex join the chat, and I posed questions, and that way she could filter all the answers and just dictate like what is the path we should go on here. So my first question was, should I just be wandering around this zone and unlocking new monsters? And interestingly, the answer was kinda, but not yet. I was like, okay. Now, the game hadn't really presented anything else to me, and I was like, oh, okay. So then I was like, should I be doing the one special assignment I have? And they were like, yes. I was like, okay. And then I asked the other question. Should I be focused on gearing at the moment before we do what we're going to do? And it was an overwhelming, I think there's several thousand people went, yes, for the love of God, yes, you are making this game infinitely harder than it's supposed to be. So I was like, okay, understood. So what we did for the remainder of the day, and I want to give a massive, massive shout out to the dozen, if not more people who can, I'm not sure how many people fit into the lobby, but I know it was full, who literally probably saved me doing solo 2 or 3 days of grinding, if not more, is that I did exactly what I did in the base game, which I think is reasonable despite our blind playthrough, is that this game has clearly been mathed to the tits. Some people want to collect all armors. Some people have, like, checked it out, and I just went, what are we getting that we can obtain now that's worth getting? So we're just cutting down on time. Like, there are different bonuses I want to pick up, like a Fluvia armor and things like that. But I was like, what is the one that's we're fine with and we can push forward with? And so there was a bit of a vote, and it was like, let's get Teostra 3-piece, a Kirin piece, and apparently, and some of you may be very relieved here, my weapon that I have been using for the entirety of Iceborne is the worst weapon in the game. For Switch Axe, anyway. I didn't see it as being that bad, right? It's up to date. It's using current materials. But they were like, dude, it is so bad. That weapon is so bad. And I'm like, why is it so bad? And they're like, the sharpness, the DPS. Oh my God. Like, we are in pain. And I did exactly what I did in the base game. It's like, right, well, let's just pick a weapon and we'll go with that, which we went with Nicaragua's weapon. We get Nick's weapon, which required a lot of effort, actually. This ended up with going, I had to get this weapon, we had to kill low-rank Toby, high-rank Toby 3 times, Nicaragua multiple times. It was, and get some rare mantle that I didn't know, and I thought I was being trolled because we had to kill Fulgur Anjanath several times. I was like, this took the rest of the day, was sorting our gear out, but ultimately we did. The gear is now, I have a set that we can be happy with, and I had to do this because I felt it was necessary to do this because the game had unlocked like infinite upgrade system, and I was like, we're either going to dump all our resources into just terrible things. And if we were playing casually, I would absolutely be looking for different armor than the set that I got at the start. Like, Barioth is like fight number 3. That's the armor I was wearing. So I was like, but which one are we getting? There's so many, right? That list goes on and on and on. There's like 50 armor sets. I was like, just which one are we getting? Let's get that so I don't need to worry about it and we can just progress forward. And then we got some... there was a big argument, apparently, that we should use the alpha versions because we don't have any good decorations. But I was like, I don't care about that too much. I like being able to modify my gear. I do that in every video game. Sometimes I want more resistances. Sometimes I don't. It's just like, and ultimately, we will just be collecting more decorations as time goes on. I get the feeling decoration farming is a huge, like, grumble in the community because they're after a specific one, and it just never appears, and there's no way of, like, targeting it. So that was kind of a thing. But I was like, we can make do. There's certain things that I want, like earplugs and things like that. I like them. It's fine. But ultimately, that's where we got to, and I dumped every resource and every penny. I had nearly 1 million money. I had hundreds of armor spheres, and that was enough to upgrade 2 pieces of the armor. That was it. And I am broke. I am flat broke. I have nothing left. I've used every armor sphere. I have no money left. I was like, wow. Okay. Yeah. It's time to start spamming those vouchers again because we can't afford anything anymore. I completed tons of bounties of getting master rank things, and it was like, you're going to need a lot more than that. But this took about 4 hours, but I think that translates to about 2 or 3 days of solo farming, so well worth it in terms of progression. So our point right now is wherever this road takes us. I'm going to continue on the special assignment because all I know is this, guys. There is something out there that everybody following along with this journey can't wait for me to get to. So it makes sense to get the gearing so we can just progress. We don't have to worry about it. And now we can go and search out whatever that is. So hopefully tomorrow, I'll let you know whatever that is. There you go. Bye, guys.